Drummerly.com Unlimited Drama Series.
The words hit me like a slap across the face at our anniversary dinner. 23 years of marriage. And my wife Marta chose that moment in front of 8 of our closest friends to raise her wine glass and deliver the toast that would change everything. To David, she said, her voice carrying that fake sweetness she used when she wanted to cut deep. The man who pays all the bills but never learned how to satisfy a woman. The silence at Romano's restaurant was deafening. 8 faces stared at me, waiting for my reaction. Greg Waters, Marta's business partner at the advertising agency, smirked behind his wine glass. Victoria, Marta's sister, looked embarrassed but didn't speak up. Our friends Jake and Danny suddenly found their pasta fascinating. I'm David Monroe, 47 years old, senior accountant at Henderson & Associates. I've never been the life of the party, never been the guy who commands a room. But I'm not stupid, and I'm definitely not weak. Well, I said, setting down my fork carefully, happy to be of service, darling. I smiled, but inside, something fundamental shifted. 23 years of marriage, 2 kids, a mortgage, shared dreams, and this is how she saw me. Not just privately, but publicly. In front of people who would remember this moment forever. The conversation limped along after that, but the damage was done. Greg kept shooting me these pitying looks, like I was some pathetic creature. Victoria tried to change the subject to her latest yoga class. Jake mumbled something about the weather, but I was already planning. See, here's what nobody at that table knew about me. I might be quiet, I might pay the bills and fix the leaky faucets, and remember to take out the trash every Tuesday morning. But I noticed things. I remember details. And for the past 6 months, I'd been noticing a lot about my wife's behavior. The late nights at the office, the new lingerie I never saw her wear, the way she guarded her phone like it contained state secrets, the credit card charges at restaurants I'd never been to, always for 2 people. Most telling of all, the way she looked at Greg Waters. Greg, with his silver hair and his vintage Porsche and his trust fund that let him play at being an advertising executive. Greg, who'd never worked a real day in his life, who treated everyone around him like servants, who assumed his money and his looks entitled him to whatever he wanted, including my wife, apparently. After dinner, we drove home in silence. Our house in Maple Grove looked the same as always. 2-story colonial, well-maintained lawn, the basketball hoop Ross had begged for when he was 12. Normal suburban life, except nothing was normal anymore. You embarrassed me tonight, I said as we walked up the driveway. Marta laughed, actually laughed. I embarrassed you. David, you embarrass yourself every day just by existing. That's when I knew for certain. This wasn't just a bad patch in our marriage. This wasn't something we could fix with counseling or a romantic getaway. This was war, and she'd just fired the first shot. But she'd made a crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. I went to my home office after she went to bed, opened my locked filing cabinet, and pulled out a folder I'd been building for months. Photos, printed emails, credit card statements, restaurant receipts. All the evidence of her affair with Greg, carefully documented and organized. My phone buzzed. A text from my old friend Trent Morrison, who'd been at dinner tonight. You okay, man? That was brutal. Trent was an ex-cop who now ran a private security company. We'd known each other since college, and he was one of the few people who'd never underestimated me. I typed back, "Can we meet tomorrow? I need your help with something." "Sure, everything all right?" "It will be." I closed the folder and looked around my office. 23 years of marriage, and it was ending. But it was going to end on my terms, not hers. Trent met me at Mickey's Diner the next morning, sliding into the booth across from me with the easy confidence of a man who'd spent 20 years dealing with liars and cheaters. "So," he said, stirring sugar into his coffee, "want to tell me what's really going on?" I slid the folder across the table. Marta's having an affair with Greg Waters. Trent opened the folder, his expression growing more serious as he flipped through the documentation. "Jesus, Dave, how long have you known?" "Suspected for months, confirmed it 3 weeks ago." I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo I'd taken from across the street, Marta and Greg coming out of the Marriott downtown, his hand on her lower back, both of them laughing. "That was last Tuesday. She told me she was at a client dinner." "And you want to what exactly? Confront them?" I want to destroy them. Trent raised an eyebrow. That doesn't sound like you. The old me wouldn't have. But the old me never got publicly humiliated by his wife in front of 8 people. I leaned forward. I'm not talking about anything illegal. I'm talking about consequences. Real consequences. Trent closed the folder. What do you need? Professional surveillance, documentation, and maybe some advice on how to make sure everyone who matters knows exactly what kind of people they really are. This is going to get messy. It already is messy. I'm just going to make sure I'm not the only one covered in mud when it's over. We spent the next hour planning. Trent knew a private investigator named Lila Stein, a former journalist who specialized in catching cheating spouses. He also knew the legal ins and outs of surveillance, what was admissible and what wasn't. The key, he said, is patience. Let them get comfortable. Let them make mistakes. How long? Give me 2 weeks, maybe 3. We'll get everything you need. That afternoon, I called my lawyer. Patricia Patel was sharp as a razor and twice as cutting. I'd used her for business contracts before, and I knew she didn't mess around. David, she said when I explained the situation, are you sure you want to go down this road? Divorce is expensive and ugly, even under the best circumstances. I'm sure, but I want to make sure I'm protected. Financially and otherwise. I'll need to see everything you have. And I mean everything. I spent the weekend organizing my evidence, creating timelines, cross-referencing credit card statements with phone records. It was like putting together a complex audit, which happened to be exactly the kind of work I was good at. Sunday night, Marta came home late again. Client crisis, she said, not even bothering to make eye contact. Which client? The Morrison account. You wouldn't understand. But I did understand. I understood that there was no Morrison account. I understood that she'd been at Greg's condo, because Trent had started surveillance that morning and had already sent me 3 photos of her car in Greg's parking garage. How's Greg handling the crisis? I asked casually. She froze for just a moment, then recovered. Fine. He's very professional. I'm sure he is. That night, lying in bed next to my wife of 23 years, I felt nothing but cold determination. She'd made her choice. Now she was going to live with the consequences. Lila Stein was everything Trent had promised. Professional, thorough, and completely without sympathy for cheating spouses. We met at her office downtown, a cramped space above a Chinese restaurant that smelled like soy sauce and betrayal. I've been doing this for 15 years, she said, spreading photos across her desk like a dealer laying out cards. Your wife and Mr. Waters aren't exactly subtle. The photos were damning. Marta and Greg at restaurants I couldn't afford. Marta and Greg walking into his condo building. Marta and Greg in what looked like a heated argument outside her office, his hand gripping her arm possessively. They've been meeting regularly for at least 8 months, Lila continued. Usually Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, sometimes weekend mornings, when you're at your son's soccer games. Soccer ended in October. I know. That's when they started spending Saturday mornings at the Hilton. I studied the photos, memorizing details. Greg's arrogant smile, Marta's body language, leaning into him, touching his arm, laughing at his jokes. She looked happier with him than she'd looked with me in years. There's more, Lila said. She pulled out a small recording device. Minnesota is a one-party consent state for recording conversations. I've been documenting their phone calls. She pressed play. Marta's voice filled the room, but not the Marta I knew. This was a different woman, breathless and excited. David's working late again tonight. Can you pick me up at 7? Greg's voice smooth and entitled. Of course, darling, I've missed you. I've been thinking about what you said about leaving him. And? I think you're right. I deserve better than a boring accountant who thinks missionary position is adventurous. They both laughed. I felt my face burn with humiliation and rage. The problem is the money, Marta continued. David controls everything. I'd need to make sure I got my fair share. Don't worry about that. I know people. Lawyers who specialize in making sure women get what they deserve. I turned off the recording. How much more of this is there? Hours. They talk about you constantly, about your marriage, your finances, your kids. Greg's been encouraging her to take you for everything she can get. What about Greg's wife, Susan? Interesting, you should ask. Lila pulled out another photo. Susan Waters filed for legal separation last month. Apparently, she's known about Greg's affairs for years, but this one's different. She hired her own investigator. This was getting complicated, but also more interesting. Susan Waters came from old Minneapolis money, the kind of family that had streets named after them. If she was finally moving against Greg, that opened up possibilities. I want to meet with her, I said. I can arrange that. But David, you need to be careful. Once you start down this path, there's no going back. There's already no going back. That evening, I sat in my office, staring at the evidence spread across my desk. 23 years of marriage, reduced to photographs and audio recordings and credit card statements, but also 23 years of being taken for granted, of being treated like a convenient appliance, of being the responsible one, while Marta got to be the fun one. The toast at Romano's hadn't been a moment of cruelty. It had been a declaration of war. Fine. She wanted a war, she'd get one. But she was about to learn that the quiet, boring accountant she'd married wasn't as harmless as she thought. Susan Waters lived in a mansion in Kenwood, the kind of place that made my nice suburban house look like a garden shed. When she opened the door, I understood immediately why Greg had married her. She was elegant in that effortless way that only came with generations of money and breeding. Mr. Monroe, she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. Thank you for coming. Her living room was bigger than my entire first floor, filled with antiques that probably cost more than my annual salary. But Susan herself seemed smaller than I'd expected, diminished somehow. I assume you know why I wanted to meet, she said, settling into a chair that looked like it belonged in a museum. Our spouses are having an affair. Among other things, she opened a leather portfolio. Gregory has been stealing from me for years. Money from my trust fund, transferred to accounts I didn't know existed. I've been building a case against him. She showed me bank statements, legal documents, correspondence with forensic accountants. Greg Waters wasn't just a cheating husband, he was a thief. The affair with your wife is just the latest in a long line of infidelities, Susan continued. But it's also the most dangerous, because she's encouraging him to be reckless. How so? He's been talking about leaving me, taking half of everything in the divorce. He doesn't understand that the money was never his to begin with. It's held in trust, protected by agreements he signed when we married. I studied the documents. You're going to destroy him financially. I'm going to destroy him completely. But I need your help. What kind of help? Susan smiled, and for the first time, I saw steel beneath the elegance. Your wife has been giving Gregory advice about how to hide assets, how to manipulate financial records. She's been using her position at the advertising agency to help him create false documentation. This was news to me. How do you know? I've had Gregory under surveillance for months. Your wife isn't just his mistress, Mr. Monroe. She's his accomplice. The implications hit me like a truck. Marta wasn't just cheating on me. She was helping Greg commit fraud. If this came out, she could lose her job, her professional reputation, possibly face criminal charges. What do you want from me? Access to your wife's computer, her files, her communications with Gregory. In exchange, I'll make sure you get everything you're entitled to in your divorce. And I mean everything. I thought about it. Susan Waters had resources I could never dream of. Lawyers, investigators, connections throughout the city's power structure. With her backing, I wouldn't just be getting revenge on Marta and Greg. I'd be ensuring my own survival. There's something else, Susan said, a gathering. Next Friday night, Gregory is hosting a party at the agency offices, a celebration for landing some big account. Your wife will be there, of course. So will everyone who matters in their professional circle. And It would be a shame if certain information became public at such an event. I understood. Susan wasn't just planning to destroy Greg privately. She wanted to humiliate him publicly, in front of everyone who mattered to him professionally. Count me in. We spent the next hour planning. Susan had contacts everywhere, in the media, in the legal system, in the social circles that Greg and Marta cared about. When we were done, Greg Waters and my wife weren't just going to lose their relationship. They were going to lose everything. As I drove home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: excitement. For 23 years, I'd been the reliable one, the predictable one, the one who cleaned up other people's messes. But I was also the one who understood how systems worked, how to follow rules and exploit loopholes, how to build an airtight case. Marta and Greg thought they were so clever, so sophisticated. They had no idea what was coming. The week leading up to Greg's party, everything fell into place with the precision of a Swiss watch.
He just gave me a massage, that's
A
it!
massage? With I Miss Your Body after?
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
Susan's resources combined with my attention to detail and Trent's security expertise created something beautiful, the perfect trap. "You're sure about this?" Trent asked as we tested the equipment one final time. We were in his office, surrounded by monitors and recording devices that looked like something out of a spy movie. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Greg's party would be held in the main conference room at Waters & Associates, the advertising agency he and Marta ran together. The same conference room where they held client presentations, where they'd been conducting their affair for months, while their employees pretended not to notice. Susan had used her connections to get us access to the building's security system. A generous donation to the building management company had ensured their cooperation. Trent's technical skills had done the rest. "Audio's clean," he said, adjusting something on his laptop. "Video's positioned perfectly. And the presentation system is ready. What about the guest list?" "Confirmed. 67 people, including everyone who matters in Minneapolis advertising. Plus local media. Greg made sure to invite the business reporters." Perfect. Greg's ego would be his downfall. Friday afternoon, I went home early, telling my assistant I wasn't feeling well. Marta was already gone, of course, preparing for the party. She'd been excited about it all week, talking about how this event would establish the agency as a major player in the market. She had no idea how right she was. I showered, put on my best suit, the navy blue one Marta had bought me for our anniversary 3 years ago, and drove downtown. The building was buzzing with activity, caterers and florists and tech people setting up for what was supposed to be Greg's triumph. I parked across the street and waited. At exactly 6:30, the guests started arriving. I recognized most of them from various business events over the years. The mayor's chief of staff, the publisher of the Business Journal, the heads of the 3 biggest companies in the Twin Cities. At 7, I walked into the building like I belonged there. "David!" Jake Henderson from the agency waved me over. "I didn't know you were coming." Marta invited me, thought I should support her big night. The conference room was packed, everyone dressed in their expensive best, holding wine glasses and making the kind of small talk that passed for conversation in professional circles. Greg stood near the front, resplendent in a suit that probably cost more than my mortgage payment, accepting congratulations like he'd just won the Nobel Prize. Marta stood beside him, radiant in a red dress I'd never seen before, playing the role of successful business partner. But I could see the way she looked at him, the way her body angled toward his, the intimacy that everyone in the room pretended not to notice. "Ladies and gentlemen," Greg called out, tapping his wine glass with a knife, "if I could have your attention." The room quieted. This was it. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight," Greg continued. "This represents a new chapter for Waters & Associates, and I couldn't have done it without my amazing partner, Marta Monroe." He gestured toward Marta, who smiled and raised her glass. Several people applauded. "In fact," Greg said, his voice carrying that smooth confidence that had always made me want to punch him, "I think it's time we acknowledge just how close our partnership really is." I saw Marta's eyes widen slightly. This wasn't part of whatever script they'd planned. Marta has been more than a business partner to me, Greg continued. She's been my inspiration, my muse, my— Your accomplice, I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. The room went silent. Every head turned toward me. I'm sorry, Greg said, his smile faltering. Did you say something, David? I said accomplice. I walked toward the front of the room, feeling 67 pairs of eyes following me. You were about to tell everyone how Marta helped you steal from your wife, weren't you? David, what are you doing? Marta hissed. I pulled out a small remote control, Trent's handiwork. I'm giving everyone the presentation they really came to see. I pressed a button. The large screen at the front of the room lit up with a photograph. Marta and Greg kissing outside the Hilton downtown, her wedding ring clearly visible. Someone gasped. I pressed the button again. Another photo. Greg and Marta entering his condo building, his hand on her ass. David, stop this right now, Marta said, her face white with fury and panic. Oh, we're just getting started. Click. A bank statement showing transfers from Susan's account to one of Greg's hidden accounts. Click. An email from Marta to Greg discussing how to hide assets from David and Susan. The room was dead silent except for the sound of wine glasses being set down on tables. You see, I said, my voice carrying clearly in the stunned silence, my wife and her business partner haven't just been screwing each other. They've been screwing all of us. Stealing from Susan Waters, defrauding clients, using this agency as a front for financial crimes. Greg lunged toward me, but Trent appeared from somewhere in the crowd, blocking his path with the casual competence of an ex-cop. I wouldn't, Trent said quietly. This is insane, Greg sputtered. David, you're having some kind of breakdown. Am I? I clicked the remote again. Audio filled the room, Marta's voice clear as day. David's such an idiot. He has no idea what we're doing. We could steal everything, and he'd probably help us carry it out to the car. Greg's laughter followed. Poor bastard. At least he's useful for something. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as possible. My wife gave a toast last week. She said I was a man who pays the bills, but never learned how to satisfy a woman. Well, Marta, here's my toast to you. I raised my water glass. I hadn't touched alcohol all evening, wanted to stay sharp. To the woman who thought she married a fool. To the man who thought money made him untouchable. And to everyone in this room who's about to watch them get exactly what they deserve. I pressed the remote one final time. The screen filled with a legal document, a restraining order against Greg, filed by Susan Waters. Another document, a criminal complaint for fraud and embezzlement. A third, divorce papers, filed that afternoon by Patricia Patel on my behalf. The FBI will be here Monday morning, I announced. I'd suggest anyone who's done business with Waters and Associates in the past 2 years contact their attorneys. Marta was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks, her perfect facade finally cracking. Greg looked like he was about to vomit. But I wasn't done. Oh, and Greg? Susan asked me to give you a message. Your Porsche has been repossessed. Your condo's being seized, and your trust fund? Turns out it was never really yours. Greg collapsed into a chair, the fight going out of him completely. I walked toward the exit, the crowd parting before me like I was Moses crossing the Red Sea. At the door, I turned back one final time. Marta, you were right about one thing. I never was very good at satisfying you, but I'm excellent at destroying people who underestimate me. The fallout from the party was everything I'd hoped for, and more. By Monday morning, the story was front-page news in the business section. Local ad executive accused of fraud, embezzlement. By Tuesday, 3 major clients had pulled their accounts from Waters and Associates. By Wednesday, the FBI had raided the offices and seized all the computers and financial records. Marta moved out of the house on Thursday, taking only what she could fit in her car. I'd had the locks changed and the security system upgraded, Trent's suggestion. You don't look like a man whose life just fell apart, he said, sitting in my kitchen Friday morning, drinking coffee and reading the latest news coverage. That's because my life didn't fall apart. Theirs did. The divorce proceedings were moving fast, thanks to Patricia Patel's efficiency and the mountain of evidence we'd compiled. Marta's lawyer, a public defender since she couldn't afford anyone better, was trying to negotiate some kind of settlement, but Patricia wasn't interested. She committed adultery, aided in financial crimes, and publicly humiliated you, Patricia had explained. Though under Minnesota law, she's entitled to exactly nothing. My phone rang. Susan Waters. David, I wanted to thank you. The FBI found everything we needed and more. Gregory's going to prison. What about Marta? That depends on whether she cooperates with the investigation. But either way, her career in advertising is over. No one will touch her after this. I felt a moment of something that might have been sympathy, but it passed quickly. Marta had made her choices. She'd chosen Greg over me, chosen money over integrity, chosen public humiliation over private conversation. Now she got to live with the consequences. The kids took it better than I'd expected. Ross, my son, called from college. Dad, I'm sorry. I always thought Mom was kind of selfish, but I never imagined she'd do something like this. Your mother made her own choices, son. You don't need to apologize for her. Are you okay? Really? I'm better than okay. I'm free. Amelia, my daughter, was more direct when she called. I hope that bastard Greg rots in jail, and I hope Mom realizes what she threw away. Your mother threw away 23 years of marriage for a man who's now facing federal fraud charges. I think she's starting to realize. Saturday morning, I was working in my garden when a car pulled up. Marta got out, looking 10 years older than she had 2 weeks ago. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, her eyes red from crying. David, please, can we talk? I kept weeding, not looking up. What's there to talk about? I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But we can work through this. 23 years of marriage has to count for something. Now I looked up. You're right. 23 years does count for something. It counts for the fact that you knew exactly how much you were hurting me when you gave that toast. It counts for the fact that you knew exactly what you were risking when you helped Greg steal from his wife. It counts for the fact that you chose him over me every single day for 8 months. I was confused. I was going through something. You were going through Greg Waters. In hotel rooms I paid for with credit cards in my name. She flinched. David, please. I have nothing. No job, no money, nowhere to live. My own sister won't talk to me. That's not my problem anymore. I'm your wife. No, I said, standing up and brushing dirt off my hands. You're my ex-wife. The papers were finalized yesterday. Her face crumpled. I love you. I know I screwed up, but I love you. You love the idea of me. The security I represented, the bills I paid, the stable life I provided, while you got to play at being a sophisticated adulteress. But you never loved me, Marta. If you had, you wouldn't have been able to humiliate me the way you did. I walked toward my house, then stopped and turned back. You know what the funny thing is? I probably would have forgiven the affair. People make mistakes, marriages go through rough patches. But that toast? That public humiliation? That showed me exactly what you really thought of me. And more importantly, it showed me exactly what I was going to do about it. David, wait. Goodbye, Marta. I went inside and locked the door. Through the window, I watched her stand in my driveway for 10 minutes, crying. Then, she got in her car and drove away. I never saw her again. Greg Waters was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for fraud and embezzlement. He'd also lost his house, his car, his trust fund access, and what remained of his reputation. Susan had been thorough in her destruction of him. Marta had cooperated with the FBI investigation in exchange for immunity from prosecution, but it hadn't saved her career. She was working as a waitress at a chain restaurant in St. Paul, living in a studio apartment, driving a 10-year-old Honda. I heard this from Victoria, who'd called to apologize for her sister's behavior and to tell me she'd always thought I was too good for Marta anyway. As for me, I was doing better than I had in years. The house felt bigger without Marta's constant criticism and drama. I'd started dating again, nothing serious yet, but it was nice to spend time with women who actually seemed to enjoy my company. I'd also gotten a promotion at work. Turns out, systematically destroying 2 people's lives while staying completely within the bounds of the law had impressed my partners. They'd made me a senior partner and given me a substantial raise. The best part, though, was the respect. The story of how the quiet accountant had taken down the arrogant advertising executive and his cheating wife had become legend in Minneapolis business circles. People looked at me differently now. They saw someone who wasn't to be underestimated. Sunday afternoon, I was grilling burgers in my backyard when Trent stopped by with beer and war stories. "Any regrets?" he asked, settling into a lawn chair. I thought about it. About the marriage ending? No. It was over the moment she gave that toast. About how I ended it? Definitely not. She really thought you'd just take it. 23 years of taking it. She had every reason to think I'd keep taking it forever. What changed? I flipped a burger, considering the question. I realized that being the good guy, the reliable guy, the guy who always takes the high road, doesn't mean you have to be the guy who gets walked on. There's a difference between being decent and being a doormat. And you chose decent. I chose justice. Everything I did was legal, ethical, and proportionate to what they did to me. I didn't break any laws, didn't hurt anyone who didn't deserve it, didn't destroy any innocent lives. Just guilty ones. Just guilty ones. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking beer and watching the sun set over my perfectly maintained suburban lawn. Somewhere across town, my ex-wife was probably getting ready for another shift, serving food to people who didn't know or care about her spectacular fall from grace. Somewhere in federal prison, Greg Waters was learning that charm and money couldn't protect you from the consequences of your actions. And here I was, in my own backyard, finally at peace. The quiet accountant had gotten the last laugh after all.